Hello everyone and welcome back. Episode number 7 of Shaykh Mahmoud Shabestari's Gulshan Raz, the Rose Garden of Mysteries. In this episode we are going to talk about a part of the poem in which Shabistari is discussing reflection, pondering. So let's get into it. As we discussed in episode number 1, a mystic from Khorasan sends Shaykh Mahmoud Shabestari a letter in which there are certain philosophical and mystical questions. So basically, the book that we are analyzing is the answer to those questions. And we said that the book is written in poetry. The whole book is written in poetry. One of the questions that the Khorasani mystic asks Shaykh Mahmoud Shabestari is this: نخست از فکر خویشم در تحیر چه چیز است آنکه میگویندش تفکر. Which means, first, I am perplexed by my own thought, by my own pondering. What is it, or what is that which we call reflection? So here, basically, he's asking about the nature of thought, about the nature of reflection. Like, what does it mean to reflect? And in this episode, we're going to see what Shabistari has to say about this. We have discussed this in the previous episodes, that one of the purposes of creation was for human beings to attain the divine knowledge. And for this attainment, there are two ways. Either you go through rational thinking, or you attain this knowledge through intuition, through intuitive knowledge, mystical vision. And in both these, a part concerns reflection. So reflection is related to both these methods. Whatever method you try to walk in this journey, you're gonna need to understand where reflection is. That's why the Khorasani mystic asks about the nature of this reflection. In the next line, the Shaykh paraphrases this question saying, مرا گفتی بگو چه بود تفکر که از این معنی بماندم در تحیر. So he's paraphrasing the question, rephrasing the question, saying, you asked me about the nature of reflection, and you said that you are perplexed by this. Now, in his answer, he's going to categorize basically his answer into two parts. In the first part, he's talking about the nature of reflection, the meaning of reflection, in the intuitive knowledge, in the mystical vision. And then it's going to take another step and explain the nature of thought, the nature of reflection in rational thinking. Discussing the role of reflection in intuition, he starts with this line: تفکر رفتن از باطل سوی حق به جزو اندر بدیدن کل مطلق. What Shabistari is saying is this: for people who walk this path through intuition, through mystical vision, through unveiling, divine unveiling, reflection means going from the appearance to the interior, going from the form to the meaning. So the purpose is attainment of divine knowledge. And the way, the tool to attain that knowledge is reflection. And reflection in this context means to see the real in the created, to see all the corporeal and non-corporeal entities as reflections of one divine essence. And having defined that, he moves on to discussing the term from the perspective of philosophers, from the perspective of rational thinkers. So he says, حکیمان کاندرین کردند تصنیف چنین گفتند در هنگام تعریف. That is, the hukama, people who do hikmah, people who do theosophy, rational thinkers in general, represented by philosophers. Philosophers, when they started writing about it, they defined it this way: که چون در دل شود حاصل تصور نخستین نام وی باشد تذکر. First, we should understand by the heart. In the Islamic intellectual tradition is meant the intellectual soul, the rational soul, the rational soul. So what is happening is this: the rational soul is the center in which the concepts are opened and categorized. So the meaning of the line would be this: Whenever a form, whenever an imagination appears in the heart, that initial form, that initial imagination is called recollection. To open this up a little bit, in rational thinking, when we are moving towards a conclusion, when we want to find something, first we need to have some preliminary principles. And without considering those preliminary principles, you cannot get to that conclusion. So when those preliminary principles come to your heart, appear in your heart as a form, as an imagination, and you want to investigate them, you haven't started examining them yet. In that stage, we call those forms recollection. So that's what this line means. Then he's going to say, because just considering those recollections, having those recollections in your heart is not going to be enough, and you need to just hold them there to reflect upon, to consider, to examine them. Then comes the next line. و زو چون بگذری هنگام فکرت بود نام وی اندر عرف عبرت. So when you hold that form there, that imagination there, to examine and to investigate, that's what we call, the Shaykh says, ibrat. And ibrat is a little bit hard to translate into English, but it would be something like due consideration, a lesson that you learn from something, or a warning. So what is happening is, first you want to do rational thinking, and you want to arrive at a conclusion. First you have some preliminary steps, preliminary principles, in order to examine, in order to get to the conclusion. First you recall them. So the first step, what we call tazakkur, or recollection. Then you start examining those recollections, which we call ibrat, or due consideration. So in the next line he says, ز ترتیب تصورهای معلوم شود تصدیق نامفهوم مفهوم. تصور کام بود بهر تدبر به نزد اهل عقل آمد تفکر. That is, the form, the imagination that you hang on to for further examination from the perspective of the rationalists is called reflection. So we bring recollections, we keep them, we examine them, and when we do this examination for the purpose of getting something out of it, learning something out of it, arriving at a conclusion, this is called a reflection. So you need to arrange, you need to categorize all the preliminary principles in certain arrangements, in certain orders, investigate them to be able to arrive at this conclusion. And this arrangement and this examining is called reflection. And having explained this, he says, ولی ترتیب مذکور از چه و چون بود محتاج استعمال قانون. So this arrangement that we just discussed, in order to understand what and why and walk through this arrangement, requires using of rules. And by rules, he is here referring to the science of logic. So in rationalism, to be able to walk through this process, you need some rules. And those rules come from the science of logic, where we have some universal rules that apply to all particular cases. But he says, he's going to actually say in the next line, this too is limited. Let's see how limited this is. He says, دگر باره در آن گر نیست تأیید هر آیینه که باشد محض تقلید. Because we are concerned with divine knowledge, rationalism is not gonna get us to the final destination, is not gonna give us everything, because it doesn't have the power. So unless there is divine approval and divine unveiling, just arranging these principles and walking through them in a step-by-step manner to arrive at a conclusion is nothing but emulating, and that's not going to help you. Here I should pause and make this clear that Islamic metaphysics is not against rationalism. It's not too traditionalist to deny all sorts of rational thinking. All it's saying is the rational thinking is something preliminary, and you take the first step through rational thinking. We think that we can arrive at everything, we can solve and understand, perceive everything through rational thinking. That's not how it works. You should use rational thinking, but in its own place. Actually, those mystics who are famous, were great philosophers. Most of them were great philosophers. Look at the works of Ibn Arabi, look at the works of Mullah Sadra, or even Shaykh Mahmoud Shabestari. He is discussing mysticism through philosophy. So philosophy brings that precision, that intellectual precision, the rules that you learn. It's not how you discover the divine knowledge, it's just that you're using it as a tool to arrive at a door. Philosophy can get you to that door, it cannot open it. Philosophy can prove that there is a being that we call the first cause or God, but philosophy can in no way help you reach it. It just tells you theoretically whether it exists or not, if it can. The path that takes you to that point, that lets you experience it and unite with it and live it, is mysticism. Philosophy helps, it makes you sharper, but when you get to that point, in that door, that's the end of philosophy. You're gonna have to use mysticism to get in, to live it, to experience it. So philosophy can help you theoretically here. Although it will give you the intellectual tools that you will also be able to use in mysticism or in other areas of life, in social aspects of your life or in political aspects. Philosophy helps you greatly, logic helps you greatly, but there are limits to it. And there are also limits to science. So let's not be tricked by the scientism that is using science as God that just makes everything come true. It doesn't. So the next line for this episode is this: راه دور و دراز است آن رها کن چو موسی یک زمان ترک عصا کن. That is, that rational thinking is a long and far way. Drop it, like Moses who dropped his stick. I'm not going to discuss this section in detail in this episode, because this is going to be the subject of the next one together with the rest of the poem. But the general thought is this: after a certain point, you got to let go of rational thinking, in the same way that Moses let go of his stick. According to the Quran, as long as Moses was rationalizing with Pharaoh, he was not listening to him. He was always rejecting him and rejecting the existence of God. And after some point, God told Moses, drop your stick, the wooden stick that was in the hands of Moses. We say Musa in Arabic. So drop it. And after that, it was not the rational thinking that did the job. It was a miracle there. So a realm for mysticism to be discussed. So the simile here is this: like, rational thinking gets you only so far. After some point, you gotta drop it and you gotta move to the next step. What is that next step? What is its quality? What can it do for you? That is going to be the discussion for our next episode. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you liked it, and looking forward to having you in our next episode.